Most e-commerce store owners open Google Analytics, stare at a wall of numbers, and close the tab without making a single decision. The dashboard is not the problem. The problem is nobody taught you what to actually look for. We've set up Google Analytics for brands tracking millions of dollars a year in sales and have been active in the tool since the beta of Universal Analytics over 13 years ago. So today, I'm going to show you the exact reports I check, the exact questions I ask, and the framework I use to turn a wall of numbers into an actual decision. Before you get into starting and analyzing reports, what you first need to understand is there are a couple things with Google Analytics 4 that are different than maybe you're used to and could make it look broken. For instance, there are a number of ways to report on the same data. It could be event level, session level, process channel attribution, or even at a user level. And depending on how you pull that, the numbers are going to flex because of how that roll up and processing happens in the background. So for instance, we're going to look at our paid social here and how it is about at $15,000. And we're going to go to now our ads reporting, which applies channel attribution with the data-driven model. And what you'll see here is the paid social is coming in only about $5,000 and emails about $26,000. This isn't broken, this is a feature. And in my opinion, this is where Google Analytics 4 is really powerful. Back in the older versions of Universal Analytics, where data-driven attribution wasn't even a thought, last click attribution won out, and whoever was last to the party got full credit. Now, with more modeling, more information, and different ways to analyze how contributions work, other channels get partial credit, and it's a more fair and reliable way to understand how your marketing dollars are being set and who is bringing in the most revenue across all of your channels in a more fair way. When we're looking at the different types of numbers, we're using them to analyze different things. The session information is really powerful if we want to look and see if there are issues, if there's real core problems with the data, or maybe some setup we didn't account for all variations of where things should be bucketed or processed. However, if I want to analyze success specifically in spend and how my marketing dollars are being stretched, I want to look at channel attribution with a data-driven model. And when you're looking at that, it's taking more into consideration than just who was last to the party and can get all the credit. It's looking at time decay, frequency, similar purchase journeys across multiple users, and taking that to consideration. If someone came from an email and then from social media and then came back direct to your site and then came back through an email again, it's deciding all those points in that path to purchase, how partial credit or higher percentages of credit should be contributed to each of those touch points. Then it's rolling it into your channel attribution, so it's a more fair and level approach, and it helps you understand actually how your marketing dollars and marketing channels are contributing to your revenue. If I wanted to understand how many times something happened on my site, I would look at the events. So event count is just giving me the raw information. It doesn't care about how many sessions someone is, if it was the same user doing it. I want to know how many times something happened. If I want to track new email subscriber signups, I don't care if it's the channel that did it or if it was one person who signed up that day, unsubscribed and signed up again. I want to know, did today have 100 email signups? And is that similar to last year when I may had a different promotion running or I changed an email pop-up or something like that? The raw count is all I need to know. So each of these different data points is going to measure something different. So when I start looking at reports, something may jump out at me that looks a little odd. The single best practice I can teach you before raising the alarm bell, take a beat and ask yourself, do I need to look at this number more in depth because of tracking? Or do I need to look at this number because there is a problem with the report? One example of this, I have a group of unassigned tracking here, and that's worth some revenue. How is something unassigned in my traffic groups? Is something tracking wrong? Am I missing UTM parameters? Is there just a rule set that I forgot about? You can go into Explore that I just set up for this very reason, and I can see that in here there are a lot of things that are related to AI search in here. And I know I didn't set up a tracking channel for this. This really isn't a problem with the tracking for most of it from a session count, except for at the top, I see unassigned. When I see unassigned, there are a bunch of things that could be happening here. Could be the 24-hour window of processing hasn't happened. Could be a consent setting that was half activated. That means to me that a little bit of this needs to go and have some more research from the technical and setup side. But there's also a little bit in here that's just configuration information that's not coming into the report as they expect it. So there's little cleanup things you can do once you look at the numbers. In the grand scheme of things, this small amount of unassigned isn't really impacting my decisions from a business perspective at this scale. So it's worth a cleanup issue, but it's not worth a raising alarm bell and causing a big fuss. When I really get concerned is if I see something that's an anomaly, like a whole drop off of a whole metric, that is where I start to panic and think something is wrong. Maybe a site release went incorrect and code got knocked off the site. Maybe there was a CSP issue that had been activated by the security team, which is now causing our tags not to fire. Big spikes and big drop offs are what is concerning for me. On the other hand, you have to look at things that are commonplace in your business. If I see year over year on the same 4th of July a spike in sales because I have a huge event, that could be seasonality. If I see that I am having a trend line lower over time in one place and rise in another, that could be just a change in behavior from my customers that we need to investigate and see how we can mitigate it or capitalize on it. So you really just have to take that beat and make sure that you're looking at that information and deciding whether or not you have to look at it from a business perspective or a data perspective. And sometimes it could be both. What I just showed you is the default framework, and you can review it from your own store today. Where we get specific is with your unique store needs, whether your unknown traffic is a consent issue or a broken tag, and which of your 2 revenue numbers can be trusted depends on how your stack is wired. That is the part we do at Zamarts. We don't do one size fits all. We look at your actual setup. If that's where you are, then click the link on screen for our insights. So on the left-hand side, we'll go to reports, we'll open acquisitions, and we'll start through here. Overview is mostly not helpful. Sometimes you can see a spike here if you want to get at a glance, but I normally come with a business question I want to answer, and the overview is not going to do it for me. So user acquisitions is the roll up where this information can be done from a user perspective. A single individual is tracked over time in multiple places over multiple sessions, and that's rolled up into this way so I can see my new versus returning users as an example. My traffic acquisitions is going to give me every single session that a person came to and interacted with on the site. So if I am a user over the last 30 minutes to an hour that came through an email, then I saw something on social and came back and it was all on my same browser. I have a couple different sessions there, and this is going to show me all the different ways that someone came to the site and interacted with it. It could be number of sessions, number of events, engagement per channel group, and you can break it up by source and medium or even the campaign that a user comes through to your site. You can also make some custom reports in here, like you'll see this non-Google campaign, but we'll stick to the classic ones. The user acquisition and lead acquisition reports for most e-commerce brands are going to be not important. For those that may have longer tail consideration funnels, this may be important to you, or if you're a subscription-based model, this could be also another place that is important, but majority of e-commerce stores don't utilize these 2 reports. While acquisition tells you how people arrived at your site, engagement's going to tell you what they did when they actually were there. So now we're going to go into the engagement portion of the report. The first part of engagement is the events. It will just do a physical count of everything that happened on your site. Number of page views, number of email signups, number of filter replies if that's something that you're tracking. It's just a straight count of all of those things that happen. The user acquisition dedupes people in some instances. The events report is not deduped. So if you added to cart twice on the same page, it'll have 2 add to carts. If you switch back and forth a size or a color variation on the site and you're tracking that, every single one of those switches will be in here. So this is really how you can understand quantity of things that change over time. And this is where you could see spikes and seasonality present themselves more heavily. The next section is pages and screens. This is going to give you a roll-up of what pages or on mobile apps, what screens people were interacting with the most. Here you'll see kind of a paradigm shift from what you're used to looking at with universal analytics. I kind of agree with it in some ways, but if you're really set in your ways, it may be a little hard to wrap your head around. In universal analytics, everything was bounce rates, time spent on site, drop-offs. In GA4, you're switching, instead of looking for the negatives, you're trying to understand the positives. In here, you'll see engagement rates, average engagement time on site, how long people stay versus how long they didn't stay, how many people actually engaged versus bounce, how many didn't. You can still add those values onto your reports by customizing it, but the shift in perspective has changed to what is being successful on site versus on what is failing. And the last page is the landing page report. So this is one more slightly narrow version of the pages and screens. This is going to give you information on where people first came to your website, the first page they landed on. And this is the one part of the site where it's going to start contributing attribution to something that is not a channel. This is going to say, okay, this page was the original source of this journey and sessions, active users, whatever you're filtering it by, and what percent of revenue came from them starting. It's a way for you to say, when I'm sending my ads to these pages, when I send them to my homepage or a direct product page, that is where I am converting more dollars from a start of a journey. It's a little bit of first touch, but I wouldn't really go into it too much from what channels are bringing you there. You're really just trying to understand, is this page performing well when people first arrive on it? It's also really helpful if you're doing A/B tests here, especially on a landing page, if you're moving content around or you're changing layouts. You can kind of see that if you send additional information from a landing page report and have revenue attributed to it as well. Now that we've gone through acquisition and engagement covering the events and page views and landing pages, what people were actually doing on the site, we're now going to go to the place where most people start but read completely wrong, and that's monetization. E-commerce purchases are going to start with what the item layouts are going to tell you. The item information is going to be your item reported revenue. So depending on how your setup is done in purchase events or views, clicks, ads, all of those type of things, you may have different versions of information in here. One example could be if you have an item level information on your purchase event, but you don't have a discount on it, your item revenue could be higher than your actual purchase information in transactions. The e-commerce purchase area is also a place where you can start to get a quick read at your individual items that you sold on the site, and it's a good way to see your top sellers here. This is also one of the data points that we can look and may be different compared to your source reported system, like your Shopify or your Salesforce Commerce Cloud, BigCo, whatever it is, versus your analytics reported, which could have different fall off events that happen. The purchase journey is really important to have set up right. This is the funnel that is going to help you understand if something is actually working correctly. This is also one of those places that if you configure certain events wrong as key events, you could be triggering more engagement rates than others. Ask me more about that in a sidebar if you're seeing weird engagement rates with your view product pages. This is really what's going to help you see your critical path funnel across the site and track fall off over time. Where purchase journey is across the whole site at a high level, the checkout journey is inside the actual checkout itself. So it's the steps within your checkout flow that actually show what's happening. This is a good example of if something's not set up right, you're going to have some zeros here. Inside your checkout, you'll have a begin when someone first starts to go through the funnel. If you have an ad shipping, an ad payment, and then finally your purchase, and all of those different events, depending on your e-commerce system, could be a little bit buggy like this. And really having the data and the strategy set up correctly at first is going to inform if all of these different funnel options are in here, and if you'll have a report to look at this at a glance. So promotions is an unuseful part of GA4. I don't think it's set up in the way that most e-commerce sites work. It's intended to allow you, when there are creative assets on site with items attached to them, to show if that promotional source is actually converting. More often than not, we repurpose this with our clients to have reporting for assets generally and their visibility and clicks on site, and don't really worry about the revenue contribution. There are some clients that have really interesting creative assets like a shop the look, where this may actually have a function and a real purpose. But generally speaking, we don't use this for an item or revenue report. We use it for assets and pull it into its own Explorer or Data Studio. And then finally, the transaction report. The transaction report is where you're really going to be able to look at if there's ebbs and flow in your sales cadences, if there are different marketing efforts on the site causing peaks and valleys. You're going to also be able to look at actual transaction information, and it can help you understand if there was a payment method failure, if there are a trend in Apple Pays happening for some reason, if you are seeing that customers from Texas are getting to the begin checkout but not purchasing, or are purchasing at a much lower rate than those in California. This kind of report is where you're going to be able to see all of that and start to slice and dice some of the things that actually happen on the final purchase event. Now, let me walk you through a scenario that happened in real life, how different parts of Google Analytics actually helped inform where that issue started to happen and what the actual impact was. So we had a client that decided to test a email pop-up banner on their site from it being a full takeover to a little card that was in the bottom right of the site. What we saw is a change in behavior in 3 different places. In the acquisition sources, we saw that traffic revenue associated with emails started to decline. And that may be strange from an email pop-up, but that was delivering a free coupon code that allowed you to get 10% off your first order. That pop-up not being interacted with as much didn't allow that email to go out. Additionally, we put in an event that let us understand if a pop-up was being viewed and if a pop-up had a successful sign up. One of the things we also found is a bug in reporting between the pop-up and the card version. The pop-up was reporting signups for every single person, even if they were already subscribed, whereas the card was only reporting net new signups. So there was a difference in event counts between those two. So now we were able to see how often we were looking at a pop-up being utilized incorrectly versus how often those pop-ups were actually leading to new subscribers and emails. Because we could look at that information on purchase events and see how many coupons were actually being used, because there were a couple different places on the site you could get that first email sign up. We were then able to look at the purchase journey and transactions and see, okay, how many transactions had a new subscriber coupon from a pop-up versus those from a footer or those at a checkout or just from a social media post. And then the whole picture came together. In total, this 1-month test from a pop-up position change cost about $7,000 a day. So it was pretty easy to tell from a calculated setup in 3 different areas to analyze and review the information and make a decision if that pop-up needed to be reverted back to its previous state with a full screen takeover. One of the other things that is great about GA4 is its integration into the ecosystem of Google. So if you're using other tools, if you have a subscription plan, if you are looking at your organic search or any number of other connections, you can pull that data and those reports into the tool. If it's connected to the tool, you can also then use it in other places like a BigQuery export or into a Looker Studio. But the bonus I want to look at here is the Search Console. And the Search Console, what it's going to do is give you a couple different things. I can see that there are brand terms for my shoes that are being reported over time, and I can see how often it is in the #1 position. This is something that you can get from your Search Console itself, but it's way easier to have one location where you can see everything together and look at the tool. And then the next thing that's in here is the organic search traffic itself. This is looking at it from another perspective. If I'm looking at the actual keywords, I can see what people are searching or generally thinking about when they're coming to the site. But then this is also showing me where they actually landed from those results to see how many of my pages optimization have keywords that are actually directing to it and where am I falling short. It's a nice, easy one place to go and look at all the integrations and not have to bounce around into different spots. So there's another bonus area I like to go into, which is the user reporting. And it's broken down into 2 sections, user attribution and tech. Let's skip over to the demographics. This is going to allow you to see things like country or state. It will also allow you to break this down into age, gender, or interest groups. So this is a great way to understand how users are interacting across your site with different points of view. Let's just say I'm going into my age group here and I want to understand how my add to cart works for ages 35 to 40. So you can see in here that it is about 4.8% of my users. It's the highest reporting. This section is heavily influenced by the data coming into your tool in 2 different ways. One, people can just opt out of this information, Google's data sources that produce it. So maybe I'm not sharing my IP address, so it wouldn't have information to show where I am regionally. Or I could be on a VPN, which would show me in a different states. It also is dependent on the security of the data for the user. So there needs to be enough data in here to anonymize a person amongst all of the data. That could be in a length of time period, or it could be the amount of data collected during a smaller time period. Both of those gates need to be passed before the information will be shown in this report. If you go into audiences, you'll see that right now it's only configured to all users and purchasers, but I could put in my newsletter subscribers or someone who's the homepage and then gone to a product detail page, and I can have a different set of user audiences there and see how they're interacting interacting with add to carts or number of pages viewed and things like that, engagement rate. It is point in time, so you can't look at this information going back. Last but not least in this section is tech. So this works similar in a way that user data does, but it does it based on how the guest is using your website. So I can go in here in device categories and I can see that my mobile, desktop, and tablet information is in here, and my mobile is by far my #1 device category. So I should be making sure my site is optimized for users in a mobile responsive view than in the other two first, and then make sure that I'm making it widely available in the other device types. So the user area is really a great way to prioritize how you're updating things on the site and how different aspects of your customers are influencing their different success metrics. There's one more section that we touched on prior in videos that is important if you're looking at how your revenue is being attributed across your website. So if you go to the advertising section on the left here, it's outside of the reports and explore, you'll be able to look at information for your channel reported revenue. In this report, for instance, I can see how things are broken down by a key performance metric. It's kind of a hidden area at the top. Here I have only the add to cart selected because that's what I want to review right now. If you go to the attribute paths, you have the same selection up here. I'm going to change this to purchasers, and then you'll see down below both how purchasers are being influenced early in their conversion path, middle, and end. And then additionally, you can see how some of the contribution is being distributed based on user pathways. So in this instance, if a guest or user comes from paid social, then has 3 emails, it's going to be distributing a 30-70 mix to this. But if I am just coming from paid social multiple times, I'm getting 100% of the revenue attribution. So this gives you a little bit of insight into the DDA models and your channel rules as to how that revenue is being distributed when it finally gets into your channel reports. There's a bunch of other good information over here in beta programs where you can import additional cost data from other sources. So right now, Google by default has Google Ads costs coming through, so I can see ROAS and performance there. But then you can also import additional sources like Meta, Pinterest, TikTok, and as long as you have a campaign ID to match on that source and medium, then it will allow you to have similar reporting that you're used to for Google Ads. The last thing out of the pre-configured reports, if you go into Explore, we looked at this a little bit earlier. Here you can create your own reports that you want to use over and over again, or are more specific data in a format that is easily accessible to you. This will allow you to set up only the data that you want to pull and look at in a report. Then you can export the data so you can do more exploration outside of Google Analytics, where you may want to combine it with some additional data, or may want to combine it with additional sources, or really dive into the minute details of the information. This has a variety of different reports and type of views you can look at. I mostly look at the table report and the line chart here. The table report's going to give you that export of information to draw out, and the line report is going to give you a quick read projection over time of when things are happening, so you can maybe pinpoint an error you need to go research. This is a pretty flexible area, but I will pull out there's a couple things that you need to keep in mind when using this. Don't mix different data sources. So if you're looking at sessions, keep session information. If you're looking at channel reported revenue, don't pull in session count there. It could be duplicative or not giving you the right result. If you're looking at item reporting data, you might not have all of the same event level special dimensions and metrics that you have set up there, because it needs to be on the items array when you have the data layer set up. So this is another one of those use cases where you really need to know the underlying data and the setup of how information is flowing into GA4. So when you're pulling in the information here, you're getting the actual insights that you need to make decisions. So that's actually how I read a Google Analytics report for e-commerce. It was never a wall of numbers. It is 3 questions: where your buyers come from, what they do on your site, and what makes them buy, and one additional skill to tell the difference between business problems and broken tracking. Read it that way, and every number suddenly has a job. You can run this exact framework on your store this week. If you want to know whether your tracking underneath your reports can actually be trusted and the numbers you're making your decisions on are real, that's what we do here at Zamarts.